The Apache girl's voice cracked like dried leather in the desert sun. "Please," she whispered through split lips, her bound wrists trembling as she reached toward the rancher's boots. I can't survive alone out here, not after what they did." Elias Crow stood frozen, his hand hovering over his Colt 45, watching blood seep through the torn fabric of her dress. 15 years he'd hunted the men who killed his family, and now this broken woman threatened to shatter everything he'd become. The sandstorm was clearing, revealing two paths: walk away and continue his revenge, or break his vow of solitude for a stranger who might be his redemption or his doom. My friends, this is a story of consent, survival, and unexpected love in the brutal Arizona territory of 1885. I invite you to stay with me until the very end, and please comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The sandstorm hit Stillwater Mesa like the wrath of forgotten gods. For 3 days, the world disappeared behind walls of red dust that scraped paint from wood and skin from bone. Elias Crow had weathered worse. 15 years in the Arizona territory taught a man to read the sky's moods like scripture. But when the winds finally died and the air cleared to reveal a battered figure collapsed against his fence post, even his weathered heart stuttered. She wasn't moving. Blood had dried dark against the wooden post, creating patterns that looked like Apache symbols, or maybe that was just his mind playing tricks after 3 days of isolation. Elias approached slowly, his boots crunching on the fresh layer of sand that covered everything like a burial shroud. His hand rested on the Colt at his hip, a habit born from too many ambushes, too many betrayals. 20 feet away, he stopped. The woman Apache from the beadwork on what remained of her dress had been tied to the post with rawhide strips that had cut deep grooves into her wrists. Someone had whipped her. The marks crisscrossed her back in a deliberate pattern, not random violence, but calculated cruelty. A message maybe, or entertainment. "Miss," his voice came out rough from 3 days of silence. No response. He moved closer, noting the defensive wounds on her palms, the bruising around her throat that suggested someone had tried to strangle her before settling on the whip. Her hair, long and black as a moonless night, was matted with blood and sand. She couldn't have been here long. The storm would have buried her completely. Someone had tied her up during the storm's final hours, leaving her to die in its aftermath. The thought made something cold and familiar rise in his chest, the same feeling he'd carried since Whispering Creek. When he knelt beside her, her eyes snapped open. The knife appeared so fast he barely saw her pull it from wherever she'd hidden it. The blade pressed against his throat before his hand could reach his gun. Her eyes, dark as deep water, wild with pain and fear, locked onto his. "Back," she whispered in English, though her accent wrapped around the word like smoke. "Back away." Elias raised his hands slowly, feeling the blade's edge part the stubble on his throat. A thin line of warmth told him she'd drawn blood. "Easy," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." Her laugh was bitter as winter wind. "All men hurt." "Maybe so." He kept his voice level, calm. "But I'm going to move back now, slow-like. You keep that knife if it makes you feel safer." He eased backward on his knees, hands still raised. The knife followed him for a moment, then her arm trembled and dropped. The small blade fell from nerveless fingers into the sand. She tried to stand, managed to get one leg under her, then collapsed again with a sound that might have been a sob or a curse. "You're hurt bad," Elias observed, still keeping his distance. "Those cuts need cleaning or they'll fester. You know that." She glared at him through tangled hair. "Let them fester. That's your choice." He stood slowly, brushing sand from his knees. "But my well's just past that rise. Clean water. Medical supplies in the cabin. Door's got a latch you can throw from inside." He turned and started walking toward his cabin. "Or you can stay here and die. Makes no difference to me." He'd gone maybe 30 feet when her voice stopped him. "Wait." He paused, but didn't turn around. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Now he did turn, studying her from under the brim of his hat. "Maybe because whoever did this to you deserves to think they succeeded. Dead women tell no tales." He spit into the sand. "Or maybe I just don't like seeing anyone tied to a post like livestock. Had my fill of that at Whispering Creek." Something flickered in her eyes at the name. Recognition, fear. It passed too quickly to read. "I can't walk." She admitted the words, clearly costing her. "Didn't ask you to." He moved to his cabin, returning with a canteen and a blanket. He set them down halfway between them, then retreated to his original distance. "Water's there when you want it. Blanket, too, when you're ready to move the cabins that way. I'll be at the barn tending my horses." He walked away without looking back, though every instinct screamed at him to help her. But he'd learned long ago that trust couldn't be forced, especially from someone who'd been brutalized. She needed to choose. From the barn, he watched through a crack in the wall as she actually crawled to the water. She drank carefully, suspiciously, like she expected it to be poisoned. Then she wrapped the blanket around herself and began the long, painful journey to his cabin. It took her almost an hour to cover 50 yards. She left the door open. Smart, an escape route. Elias waited another hour before approaching, making sure his footsteps were heavy enough to announce his arrival. He stopped on the porch, not crossing the threshold. "There's jerky in the tin by the stove," he called. "Bandages in the chest beside the bed. I'll be out here if you need anything." "Why?" Her voice came from inside, stronger now, with water in her. "Why are you doing this? Already told you." "No, the truth." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun sink toward the mountains, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. "Because 15 years ago I found another woman tied to a post. My wife. Too late to help her." He touched the brim of his hat. "I'll be at the barn." This time, when he walked away, he heard her moving inside the cabin, the sounds of someone trying to tend their own wounds, pride and practicality warring with each pain-filled gasp. After a while, he heard something else singing, low and mournful in Apache, a prayer song or maybe a death song. He'd learned enough of the language to recognize the rhythm, but not the words. Night fell like a dropped curtain in the desert. Elias built a small fire outside the barn, far enough from the cabin to be non-threatening, but close enough that she'd know she wasn't alone. He'd just settled in with his coffee when her shadow appeared in the cabin doorway. "The bandages," she called. "I can't reach my back." "There's a mirror in the chest. You can—" "I can't reach." The words came out sharp, angry, not at him, he realized, but at her own helplessness. He stood slowly. "I can talk you through it, or—" He let the option hang. "Or you come in here and I kill you if you try anything." "Fair enough." He walked to the cabin, stopping at the door. In the lamplight, he could see she'd managed to clean some of the wounds, though the effort had clearly exhausted her. She sat on the floor, her back to him, the blanket pulled down just enough to expose the whip marks. The knife lay within easy reach of her right hand. "Infection's already starting in some of these," he said quietly. "Needs alcohol." "Then use it." He gathered the supplies, then knelt behind her, careful to keep his movements visible and predictable. The first touch of alcohol-soaked cloth made her whole body go rigid, but she didn't make a sound. "These are precise," he said as he worked. "Whoever did this knew how to make it last." They did. Apache don't usually whip their own. Her head turned slightly. Who says they were Apache? He continued cleaning the wounds in silence. Up close, he could see other scars, older ones. This wasn't her first time suffering violence. When he started applying the salve, she spoke again. "You speak Apache." "Some. Where did you learn?" "Here and there. Helps when you're tracking in Apache territory." "Tracking who?" "Men who need killing." She was quiet for a moment. "The men from Whispering Creek." His hands stilled. "You know about that?" "Everyone knows about Whispering Creek. The massacre. The soldier who refused orders and got shot for it." She turned to look at him directly for the first time. They say he survived. Say he's been hunting the men who did it ever since. Stories grow in the telling. So do legends. She studied his face. You're him, Elias Crow, the ghost of Whispering Creek. Just Elias, and I'm no ghost. No, she agreed, turning back around so he could continue working. Ghosts don't have gentle hands. The observation caught him off guard. He focused on wrapping the bandages, trying not to think about how long it had been since anyone had called any part of him gentle. There, he said, tying off the last bandage. That should hold. You'll need to change them daily. I know how to tend wounds. She pulled the blanket back up, then surprised him by asking, Do you have whiskey? For the pain, for the memories. He fetched a bottle from his private stock along with 2 glasses. She raised an eyebrow when he poured both. Seemed rude not to join you, he said. They drank in silence for a while, the cheap whiskey burning away some of the sharp edges of the day. Finally, she spoke. My name is Nayeli Kai. Nayeli means I love you in Apache. She looked surprised. You do know the language. Enough to get by. Not enough to understand that song you were singing earlier. It was for my sister. She died last winter. She took another sip. They said it was illness, but I know better. Who's they? Her jaw tightened. The ones who decide everything now, who sell our traditions for silver and safety. Before he could respond, a sound from outside made them both freeze. Horses, several of them moving fast. Elias was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Nayeli grabbed her knife, though she swayed when she stood. Stay inside, he ordered, moving to the window. Through the darkness he could see torches. 5 riders, maybe 6, heading straight for his cabin. Even from a distance he recognized the silver hair of the lead rider. Harrow, he breathed. You know him. Nayeli's voice was tight with fear. Colonel Vance Harrow, ex-military, calls himself sheriff now, though nobody elected him. He checked his rifle. He's one of them, from Whispering Creek. Her intake of breath was sharp. He's the one who hurt you, who ordered it. Her knuckles were white around the knife handle. Said I was spreading dissent, telling the children stories they shouldn't hear. The riders were getting closer. Elias could make out Harrow's face now that same cruel smile he'd worn 15 years ago. Get to the root cellar, Elias said. There's a hidden door behind the preserve shelves. I'm not hiding. You can barely stand. I can still fight. He turned to argue and saw something in her eyes that stopped him. The same look he saw in his own mirror every morning. The look of someone with nothing left to lose except the choice of how to lose it. Fine, but you follow my lead. The riders stopped just outside rifle range. Harrow's voice carried across the desert night like a rattlesnake's warning. Elias Crow, I know you've got the woman. Send her out and we can all go about our business peaceful-like. Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle casual in his hands. Evening, Colonel. Bit late for social calls. It's sheriff now, and this is official business. That Apache witch is wanted for sedition and theft. Theft of what? Information, sacred knowledge that belongs to the Apache Council. Nayeli appeared in the doorway behind Elias. Knowledge that Taza Malak sold you mean? Stories that weren't his to sell. One of the riders shifted nervously. Elias caught the movement, filed it away. Now, Harrow said, his tone patronizing. Let's not make this complicated. The woman comes with us, and you can go back to your hermit ways, Crow. Though I am curious what the famous ghost of Whispering Creek is doing harboring fugitives. Same thing you're doing wearing a badge you've got no right to. Playing pretend. Harrow's smile faltered. Careful, Crow. That sounds like threatening an officer of the law. No threat, just observation. See, I've been keeping track of you, Colonel, all of you from that day. Morrison died in that saloon fire in Tucson. Shame about that. Williams got himself snake-bit down in Mexico. Real tragedy. And now here you are, last of the bunch, playing sheriff in my territory. You threatening me, Crow? No, sir. Just noting how dangerous the frontier can be. All sorts of accidents can happen to a man who's made enemies. He shifted the rifle slightly. Now you boys have had a long ride for nothing. The lady's my guest and she's staying put. She's Apache property, one of the other riders said. Taza Malak has spoken for her. Nayeli spit in the dirt. Taza speaks for no one but himself and whoever pays him. Careful, woman, Harrow warned. That's treason talk. Truth talk, she shot back. Everyone knows he killed my brother to take leadership. Everyone knows you backed him. Another rider shifted. More nervous energy. Elias was starting to see the cracks in Harrow's group. Enough of this, Harrow declared. Boys, if they won't come peaceful. The shot came from behind them. One of Harrow's men cried out, his torch falling as his horse reared. In the confusion, Elias saw a small figure dart between the horses, a child, maybe 13, Apache from the look of him. The boy, Harrow shouted. Get the boy. But the kid was already gone, vanished into the rocks like smoke. The wounded rider was cursing, clutching his shoulder. That's twice now someone's drawn blood on my land, Colonel, Elias said calmly. Third time I take it personal. Harrow's face was red with rage, even in the torchlight. This isn't over, Crow. That woman knows things we need. Then you should have asked nicely, instead of tying her to a post and whipping her near to death. Sometimes lessons need teaching. Yes, Elias agreed, and something in his tone made all the riders reach for their guns. They do. For a long moment, violence hung in the air like the last moments of sunset. Then Harrow wheeled his horse around. We'll be back, with more men and proper papers. Looking forward to it, they watched the riders disappear into the darkness. Only when the torchlights were completely gone did Nayeli sag against the doorframe. The boy, she breathed. That was Che. You know him. Everyone knows him. He escaped from the mission school 3 weeks ago. They've been hunting him ever since. She looked out into the darkness. He's been following me, protecting me. Seems like a good kid. He's more than that. She stopped herself. Before Elias could ask, a small voice came from surprisingly close. They gone? The boy materialized from behind the water trough, making Elias reassess his tracking skills. The kid moved like a ghost himself. Che, Nayeli said warmly. Come inside. You must be hungry. The boy looked at Elias suspiciously. He's white. He's also got food and medical supplies, Elias said dryly. And I don't tie children to posts. Che considered this, then nodded and followed them inside. In the lamplight, Elias could see the boy was in rough shape, thin bruised clothes torn from hard travel, but his eyes were sharp alert. You've been tracking us since town, Nayeli asked. The boy nodded, already attacking the jerky Elias offered. Saw what they did, followed to make sure you were okay. That was dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. The boy's matter-of-fact tone made him sound older than his years. Ever since they started taking the story keepers. Elias and Nayeli exchanged glances. What do you mean taking? Elias asked. Elder Sani, grandfather Nakai, others. Anyone who knows the old stories, the sacred places. He looked at Nayeli. They wanted you too. That's why Taza had you whipped, to make you tell. Tell what? Elias asked. Nayeli was quiet for a moment, then. The location of the Valley of Souls, where our ancestors hid the sacred objects during the Spanish raids. Taza thinks if he gives it to the whites, they'll make him rich. Give him power over all Apache. And Harrow wants it. Why? Gold. The Spanish always said we had gold hidden there. She laughed bitterly. They never understood. The treasures aren't gold. They're our history, our memory. Without them, we're just another conquered people with nothing to pass on. The boy had stopped eating. Elder Sani wouldn't tell them, even when they... He trailed off. When they what? Nayeli asked gently. Things. Bad things. The boy's young face was too hard, too knowing, but she still wouldn't tell. So they took her somewhere, said they'd make her talk eventually. Elias felt that cold feeling rising again. Where Needle Canyon, it's where Harrow does his real work, away from town, away from witnesses. I know it. Elias's voice was grim. Used to be an old military outpost, abandoned after the treaty. Not abandoned now, Che said. Taza's men guard it, and sometimes at night you can hear. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Nayeli stood abruptly swayed, caught herself on the table. We have to get her out. We will, Elias said, but not tonight. You can barely stand, and charging in blind will just get us killed. She's an elder. She's survived this long. One more night won't matter if we do this right. He looked at the boy. How many guards? Usually 6. More when Harrow's there. Schedules. They change guard at dawn and dusk. Elias nodded, his mind already working through possibilities. Good intel, kid. You'd make a good scout. The boy's chest puffed slightly at the praise. He's a child, Nayeli protested. So was I when I learned to track, Elias said. The frontier doesn't much care about age, just ability. He looked at Che. You want to help your people? Yes. Then you'll do exactly as I say when I say it. No heroics, no taking risks. You're our eyes, not our gun. Understood? The boy nodded solemnly. Nayeli looked between them, something softening in her expression. You're really going to help us. I've got my own reasons for wanting Harrow dealt with. But it's more than that. She studied him. You could have killed him tonight. Why didn't you? Elias was quiet, watching the lamp flame dance. 15 years I've been hunting these men. 15 years of blood and vengeance. And what's it got me? An empty cabin and nightmares that won't quit. He met her eyes. Maybe it's time I tried fighting for something instead of just against it. Before she could respond, Che yawned hugely. The moment broke and Nayeli smiled, the first real smile Elias had seen from her. Sleep, she told the boy. Tomorrow we plan. Elias gave up his bed to them. Nayeli protested but was overruled by simple practicality. She needed rest to heal. He took his bedroll to the porch rifle close at hand. The desert night was full of its usual sounds. Coyotes whined, the scurrying of small creatures. But underneath it all, he could hear something else. Breathing from inside. The sound of people sleeping safely. It had been 15 years since his cabin had held that sound. Near dawn, he heard movement inside. Nayeli emerged, moving stiffly but more steadily than before. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Rarely do. She settled beside him on the porch, maintaining careful distance. Too many ghosts. Know the feeling. They watched the eastern sky lighten, painting the mountains in shades of purple and rose. The boy trusts you, she said finally. That's rare. He doesn't trust anyone since the school. What did they do to him there? What they do to all Apache children. Cut their hair, forbid their language, beat them for practicing their traditions. Call it civilizing. Her voice was bitter. They tried to strip away everything that made him Apache. Seems like they failed. With him, yes, but how many others have they succeeded with? How many children now see their own culture as shameful? She pulled the blanket tighter. That's why the stories matter, why the elders matter. They're the threads that hold us together. And Taza would sell those threads for silver. Taza would sell his own mother for power. She was quiet for a moment. He did, actually. Told the soldiers where to find her when she was hiding resistance fighters. Charming fellow. He was different once, before the whiskey and the promises, before he learned that betraying your people pays better than protecting them. The sun crested the mountains, flooding the desert with gold light. Inside, Che stirred, mumbling something in Apache. Thank you, Nayeli said suddenly, for last night, for not letting them take me. You don't owe me thanks. No, but you have it anyway. She stood, wincing. I should check my bandages. Need help? No, I can manage. but she paused at the door. That woman, your wife, what was her name? Sarah. Sarah and little Emma. They were... He stopped the words catching like thorns. They were loved. Nayeli finished gently. That's all that needs saying. She went inside, leaving him with the sunrise and memories that cut deeper than any knife. An hour later, they gathered around his rough table, a map spread between them. Che had drawn Needle Canyon from memory, marking guard positions and routines with surprising detail. The main entrance is here, the boy explained, pointing, but there's an old game trail on the north side, very steep, but possible, Elias finished. I know it, used it once to track a mountain lion. Elder Sani is kept in the old commander's quarters. Che continued. Stone building, 1 door, 1 window. Guards, 2 at the door always. More inside, maybe. Elias studied the map, his mind running through scenarios. We'll need a distraction, something to pull most of them away. Fire, Nayeli suggested. Too dangerous. Canyon winds are unpredictable. He tapped the map thoughtfully. But if someone were to steal their horses, they'd have to chase on foot, Che said excitedly. And stealing horses is something Apache are very good at. Nayeli finished with a slight smile. Can you ride? Elias asked her. Better than you, probably. Doubt that, but we'll see. He looked at Che. You know where they keep the horses? Corral on the south end. Usually just 1 guard at night. Then here's what we do. They spent the morning planning, but their preparation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Elias grabbed his rifle, but relaxed when he saw who it was. Ruby, he called to the woman dismounting, bit far from your store. Ruby Whitlow was a handsome woman in her 40s, tough as leather and twice as useful. She ran the general store in town and knew everyone's business without being a gossip about it. Elias Crow, you've stirred up a hornet's nest, she said without preamble. Harrow's in town recruiting men, offering good money for anyone willing to ride against Apache rebels. How many takers? Fewer than he'd like, more than I'm comfortable with. She noticed Nayeli and Che. So it's true. You've got yourself some guests. Ruby, meet Nayeli and Che. Folks, this is Ruby. She's good people. Ruby studied them, then nodded. The boy who escaped the school, and the woman who tells the old stories. Harrow's got wanted posters up for both of you. How much? Che asked with interest. $50 for you, 100 for her. The boy looked offended. Only 50. Despite everything, Nayeli laughed. The sound transformed her face, and Elias found himself staring before he caught himself. Ruby didn't miss it. Her eyebrow rose slightly, but she just said, I brought supplies, medical goods, ammunition, food. Figured you might be running low. I can't pay you right now. Did I ask for payment? Ruby started unloading her saddlebags. Harrow's been bleeding this town dry with his taxes and fees. About time someone stood up to him. This could make you a target, Elias warned. Honey, I've been a target since I refused to marry him last year. She handed Nayeli a package. Fresh bandages and that good salve from the Chinese doctor. Works wonders on whip marks. Nayeli's eyes widened. How did you... Harrow was bragging about it in the saloon, made me sick. Ruby's face was hard. There's a special place in hell for men who hurt women and call it justice. While the women talked, Elias pulled Che aside. I need you to do something for me. What? Ride to the Apache camp. Find Uncle Kiona. You know him. The boy nodded. Everyone knows the war leader. Tell him what's happening. Tell him about Elder Sani and Needle Canyon. See if he'll help. He won't trust a message from a white man. Then don't say it's from me. Say it's from her. He nodded toward Nayeli. And give him this. He pulled something from around his neck, a small silver medallion on a leather cord. He'll recognize it. Che studied the medallion. This is Apache work. It was. Long time ago. Someone gave it to me when I did them a good turn. Time to call in the favor. The boy pocketed the medallion and was gone before anyone noticed. Kid really did move like smoke. Ruby left near midday with a promise to keep her ears open. After she was gone, Nayeli asked, "Why do you trust her?" "She was Sarah's friend, helped me bury them." He said it matter-of-factly, but Nayeli heard the weight underneath. And the medallion. Story for another time. She didn't push. They spent the afternoon preparing cleaning weapons, gathering supplies, studying the map. As the sun started its descent, Che returned, breathing hard. "Uncle Kiona says he'll come tonight, midnight, at Red Rock Springs." "How many men?" "He didn't say, but he said to tell you the debt is paid after this." "Fair enough." Elias looked at the others. "We move at dark." The ride to Red Rock Springs was tense. Nayeli rode well despite her injuries, and Che seemed born to the saddle. They kept to the shadows, avoiding the main trails. The moon was new, providing just enough light to navigate, but not enough to be easily spotted. Uncle Kiona was waiting for them with 5 warriors. He was an imposing man, scarred from countless battles, with eyes that had seen too much, but still held fire. "Elias Crow," he said in accented English, "the ghost of Whispering Creek." "Uncle Kiona, thank you for coming. I come for Elder Sani, not for you." But his tone wasn't hostile. "Though I remember the day you earned that medallion." "As do I." Kiona looked at Nayeli. "Kai's daughter, your father was a good man." "He was. He would be proud that you fight for the old ways. He would want Elder Sani freed." "Yes." Kiona turned back to Elias. "Your plan." They went over it quickly. Kiona's men would steal the horses, drawing guards away. Elias and Nayeli would use the game trail to reach Elder Sani. Che would be their lookout, using bird calls to signal. "And if it goes bad," Kiona asked, "then we fight our way out." "You mean you die?" "Maybe, but Elder Sani goes free either way." Kiona studied him. "You've changed, Ghost." "Have I? Once you would have gone in alone, killed everyone. Now you make plans work with others." He almost smiled. "Perhaps there's hope for you yet." They moved out, splitting into groups. The approach to Needle Canyon was treacherous in the dark. More than once, Elias had to catch Nayeli as loose rocks shifted under her feet. Each time she pulled away quickly, but he noticed she didn't flinch from his touch. Anymore, from their position on the game trail, they could see the camp below. Che had been accurate, 6 guards visible, probably more inside. The stone building that held Elder Sani was lit by a single lantern, an owl call, Che's signal. The horses were in position. Then chaos, the thunder of hooves, shouts of alarm guards running toward the corral. In the confusion, 2 shadows slipped down the steep trail. They reached the building just as most of the guards took off after the horses. 2 remained at the door, alert but distracted. Elias came from the left, his knife silent in the dark. The guard dropped without a sound. Nayeli took the other from the right, her movements fluid despite her injuries. They dragged the unconscious men into the shadows. Inside, Elder Sani sat straight-backed on a wooden chair, her dignity intact despite bruises that marked her weathered face. When she saw Nayeli, her eyes brightened. "Foolish child," she said in Apache, "you should not have come." "Respectfully, grandmother, you're wrong," Nayeli replied, already working on the ropes that bound the elder. "Hurry," Elias urged. The sounds of pursuit were getting distant soon. Someone would realize the horses were a diversion. But as they helped Elder Sani stand, footsteps echoed outside. Not guards, too measured, too confident. Taza Malik entered with 2 men. The Apache leader was younger than Elias expected, handsome, in a cruel way with eyes like a snake's. "Nayeli," he said pleasantly, "I heard you'd survived. Pity." His English was perfect, educated, and the famous Elias Crow. "What interesting company you keep, cousin." "I'm not your cousin," Nayeli spat. "No, your brother thought differently before he died." Nayeli lunged, but Elias caught her. Taza laughed. "Such fire, that's what I always loved about you. Well, that and other things." "Enough talk," one of Taza's men said. "Kill them and be done." kill them. No, no. Harrow wants the woman alive. She knows things. Taza smiled. Besides, she and I have unfinished business. Don't we, my dear? The way he said it, the way Nayeli tensed, Elias understood. His finger found his trigger. You're going to let us walk out of here, he said quietly. Am I, and why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll kill you. Your men might get me after, but you'll be dead first. You're fast crow, but not that fast. Want to bet your life on it? They stood frozen, a tableau of violence waiting to happen. Then a bird call, not Che's signal, but something else. Taza's men looked nervous. Boss, one said, that sounds like... The window exploded inward. Apache warriors flooded the room, not Kiona's men, others, younger, angrier. In seconds, Taza's guards were down, and Taza himself was on his knees with a knife at his throat. So, a young warrior said, the traitor and the murderer, the council will be pleased. The council, Taza's voice cracked, but I speak for the council. Not anymore. The warrior looked at Elder Sani. Grandmother, are you hurt? Nothing that won't heal Naichi. Elias noticed Nayeli had gone very still. Naichi. The warrior turned to her, and his stern expression softened. Hello, sister. Sister. Taza had said her brother was dead, but Taza says many things, all lies. Naichi helped Elder Sani toward the door. Come, we need to leave before gunshots erupted outside. Harrow's voice boomed across the canyon. Apache raiders, kill them all. The room exploded into chaos. Elias pushed Nayeli down as bullets shattered what was left of the window. Taza used the distraction to break free, running into the night. Go, Elias shouted. Get Elder Sani out. Not without you, Nayeli shouted back. This is my fight, our fight. There wasn't time to argue. Harrow's men were closing in. Elias could see the colonel himself, silver hair gleaming in the firelight, that same damn smile on his face. Time slowed. 15 years collapsed into this moment. Elias raised his rifle, Harrow in his sights. One shot to end it all, but then Che was there, materializing from nowhere, tugging at Elias's arm. Come on now. The moment broke. Instead of shooting Harrow, Elias laid down, covering fire, driving the attackers back. They ran, all of them, even Elder Sani, moving with surprising speed. Up the game trail, horses, waiting Kiona's men holding the path. They rode hard through the night, not stopping until they reached a defensible position in the red rocks. Only then did Elias realize he was bleeding. A bullet had grazed his ribs. Let me see, Nayeli demanded. It's nothing. Let me see. Her hands were gentle but firm as she examined the wound. You'll live, but it needs cleaning. As she worked, Naichi approached. You had Harrow in your sights. Why didn't you take the shot? Elias looked at Che, who was helping Elder Sani drink water. Because that boy reminded me there's more important things than revenge. Noble, stupid but noble. Naichi studied him. My sister seems to trust you. Your sister can speak for herself, Nayeli said sharply. And yes, I trust him, even though he's white, because he's proven himself. She finished bandaging Elias's ribs. He could have turned me over to Harrow. Instead, he risked everything to save Elder Sani. Naichi didn't look convinced. The council will want to speak with you, all of you. After we rest, Elder Sani said with authority that brooked no argument. The spirits can wait one more day. As dawn approached, they made camp in the red rocks. Elias found himself sitting apart, watching the sunrise paint the desert. His chance at Harrow was gone. 15 years of hunting, and he'd let it slip away for a boy and an elder he barely knew. Regrets. Nayeli settled beside him, closer than before, but still maintaining careful distance. Maybe you... None. She was quiet for a moment. You saved my life. Twice now. You saved mine, too. That guard would have shot me if you hadn't... I don't mean the fighting. She pulled her knees to her chest. looking younger, vulnerable. When you found me, I was ready to die, wanted to. You gave me a reason not to. What reason? She looked at him, those dark eyes, deep as still water. Hope, that maybe not all men are monsters. That maybe some battles are worth fighting. That maybe... She stopped. Maybe what? But before she could answer, Che ran up. Riders coming, lots of them. Elias grabbed his rifle, but Kiona waved him down. Apache riders, the council comes. The tribal council arrived with the morning sun, 5 elders each, bearing the weight of their people's future. They listened as Elder Sani told her story, as Nietzsche reported Taza's betrayal, as Kiona described the raid. Then they turned to Elias. White man, our eldest said, you fought for our people. Why? Because it was right. Many things are right. Few whites care. I'm not most whites. No, the elder agreed. You are the ghost of Whispering Creek, the soldier who refused to kill Apache children. I refused too late, after too many had already died. But you refused, and you've spent 15 years seeking justice for that day. The elder studied him. Perhaps it's time you stopped seeking and started building. I don't understand. The war between our peoples won't end with violence. It will end with understanding, with bridges. He looked at Nayeli. And sometimes bridges must be built between unlikely shores. Nayeli's face reddened, but she met the elder's gaze steadily. Taza has fled to Harrow, another council member said. Together they're gathering men to attack our camps, to force us to reveal the Valley of Souls. Then we fight, Nietzsche said. With what? The elder asked. Half our warriors follow Taza. The other half are scattered, protecting different camps. There's another way, Elias said slowly. Harrow's operating outside the law. Even his authority as sheriff is questionable. If we could prove his crimes to the territorial governor, no white court will convict him for killing Apache. No, but they'll convict him for stealing from white merchants, for extortion, for murder of white settlers. Elias stood. I've got evidence, hidden away. 15 years of tracking these men, documenting their crimes. And you'd reveal yourself, give up your anonymity. Elias looked at Nayeli, at Che, at Elder Sani. For the right cause, yes. The council murmured among themselves. Finally, the eldest spoke. We will consider this. But first, the immediate threat. Harrow and Taza plan to attack the camp at Sleeping Wolf Canyon tomorrow night. Many families are there. Then we evacuate them, Kiona said, to where every safe place is known to Taza. Not every place, Elder Sani said quietly. Everyone turned to her. The Valley of Souls. We take them there. Shocked silence. Grandmother, one council member said carefully, that place is sacred. It's meant to protect our people. That's why our ancestors created it. She stood every inch, the matriarch. I speak as keeper of the old ways. The valley opens to those in need. But only you know the way, someone protested. No. Elder Sani looked at Nayeli. There is another. All eyes turned to Nayeli, who looked stunned. Grandmother, I don't... Your mother taught you as hers taught her. You know the songs, the markers. You've always known. But I'm not worthy. I'm not even fully Apache. My grandmother was Mexican. You are exactly who you need to be. Elder Sani took Nayeli's hands. The bridge the elder spoke of, you've always been it. Between worlds, between peoples. That's not weakness. It's strength. Tears ran down Nayeli's face. Instinctively, she reached for Elias's hand. He took it without thinking and only realized what he'd done when he felt every eye on them. He started to pull away, but Nayeli held tight. If we do this, she said, addressing the council, we do it together, all of us, Apache and white, as allies. The council exchanged looks. Finally, the eldest smiled, a small thing, but genuine. The world changes. Perhaps we must change with it. He looked at Elias. You'll need those documents and allies among the whites. I know someone, Elias said, thinking of Ruby and her connections. A few someones, actually. Then we have much to prepare. The elder stood. Tomorrow we save our people. The day after, we save our future. As the council dispersed to organize the evacuation, Elias found himself alone with Nayeli again. You held my hand, she said softly. You held mine first. I did. She looked at their still joined hands. Is this acceptable? I don't know. Is it? My mother would be scandalized. My father would have shot you. And you? She squeezed his hand gently. I think maybe bridges have to start somewhere. Before he could respond, Che ran up again. The boy was everywhere at once. Mr. Crow, Nayeli Elder Sani wants to see you. She says it's time to prepare for the valley. They followed the boy, hands still linked toward a future neither could have imagined when the sandstorm cleared just days ago. Behind them the sun rose higher, burning away shadows and illuminating a path forward that would require courage, trust, and perhaps something that looked very much like love. But first they had a people to save, and a justice to serve that was 15 years in the making. The ancient songs would be sung, the sacred valley would open, and somewhere in the collision between two worlds, in the space between vengeance and forgiveness, something new would be born, something worth fighting for, something worth living for. The rain came that night like a blessing from forgotten gods, washing the blood from the rocks where they'd fought just hours before. Elias stood watch at the entrance to the narrow canyon where they'd hidden the family's water streaming off his hat brim as he counted the shadows moving in the darkness. 43 souls, women, children, elders, all depending on a sacred valley that might be legend and a route only Nayeli claimed to half remember from childhood songs. You should rest. Nayeli's voice came from behind him, soft enough not to wake the sleeping children nearby. Can't. Harrow's out there somewhere, and Taza knows these canyons better than anyone. Except me. She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her despite the cold rain. I grew up running these trails before my mother decided I needed to learn proper ways. And did you learn the proper ways? Her laugh was bitter. I learned enough to know that proper usually means forgetting who you are. She pulled her blanket tighter, wincing as the movement pulled at her healing wounds. My mother thought if I could pass for Mexican life would be easier. My father wanted me to be fully Apache. In the end, I was neither and both. That why Taza targeted you. She was quiet for a moment, watching the rain create temporary waterfalls down the canyon walls. Taza wanted to own me. When I refused, he spread rumors that I was barren, unsuitable for marriage. In our culture, it's a kind of death. Her voice caught. My brother defended me, fought Taza in council. 3 days later, Naichi was supposedly killed in a raid. But he survived. Barely. Some of the younger warriors found him, hid him, nursed him back. They've been building resistance ever since. She turned to look at him, rain droplets catching on her eyelashes like tears. That's why this matters so much. It's not just about the valley or the artifacts. It's about choosing our own future. A sound in the darkness made them both freeze. Elias's hand found his gun, but it was just Che materializing from the shadows like he'd been born from them. Riders, the boy whispered urgently, coming up the south trail. How many? 3. Moving careful like. Elias made a decision. Wake Naichi and Kiona, quietly. Tell them to get everyone ready to move. The boy vanished as quickly as he'd appeared. Nayeli started to follow, but Elias caught her arm. No, I need you to start leading them to the valley. Without you, I'll by time catch up. That's not... She stopped, reading something in his face. You think it's Harrow? I know it is. Man's got a pattern. 3 scouts first measure the defenses, then the main force at dawn. He checked his rifle muscle memory from 15 years of hunting. Take them through Devil's Backbone. Even if Taza's with them, he won't expect that route. It's dangerous in daylight. At night in the rain, you can do it. He met her eyes. I trust you. Something shifted in her expression. Before he could react, she pressed something into his hand, a small beaded medicine bag. For protection, she said. My mother made it for my father before his last battle. Did it work? He came home. Her fingers lingered on his for a moment. So you better too. She was gone before he could respond, organizing the evacuation with quiet efficiency. Within minutes, the families were moving shadows against shadows children carried to keep them silent. Elder Sani paused as she passed him. Don't die for vengeance, young man. Live for something better. Then they were gone, leaving Elias alone with the rain and the approaching danger. He positioned himself behind a cluster of rocks, rifle ready, and waited. The scouts appeared right where he expected, moving with military precision. Not Apache white men, probably ex-soldiers, like Harrow. Elias let them pass, counting heartbeats, then fired a shot that took the hat off the trailing rider. Ambush! One yelled, diving for cover. Elias was already moving, scrambling up the canyon wall to a new position. He fired again, this time shattering a canteen, not trying to kill, just to scare, to delay. It's him! Another voice excited. It's Crow Colonel, said he'd be here. So Harrow had predicted this. Smart, but not smart enough. Elias led them on a chase through the rocks, always staying just out of reach, drawing them away from the path the families had taken. When he heard horses, many horses approaching fast, he knew the main force had arrived earlier than expected. Time to go. He slipped away in the confusion, using every trick 15 years had taught him. By the time he heard Harrow's voice roaring orders, he was already 2 miles away, following the subtle markers Che had left. The Devil's Backbone route was treacherous, even in good conditions. In the rain, in the dark, it was near suicide. The path was barely 3 feet wide in places, with sheer drops on both sides. Elias caught up to find the evacuation stopped, someone sobbing. What happened? He asked Naichi. Child almost fell. Mother's having a panic attack. The warrior looked frustrated. We can't move until she calms down, but every minute. Nayeli appeared, leading a terrified woman and child. She was singing softly in Apache, the same morning song he'd heard that first night, but now transformed into something soothing, reassuring. The woman's breathing slowed, matching the rhythm of the song. Better? Nayeli asked gently. The woman nodded, clutching her child. Good, follow my steps exactly. Don't look down, look at my back, nothing else. She led them across the narrow section, sure-footed, despite the rain and her injuries. One by one, the others followed, drawing courage from her confidence. When the last person was across, Naichi shook his head in amazement. She's always been like that, he told Elias. Even as a child, people follow her without knowing why. I know why, Elias said quietly. They pushed on through the night, the rain finally stopping as dawn approached. As the sun broke the horizon, they crested a ridge, and Nayeli stopped, raising her hand. There, she said, pointing to what looked like an impenetrable wall of red rock. The entrance. I don't see anything, Kiona said. Nayeli smiled. That's the point. She moved to what appeared to be solid stone and pushed. A section swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. Our ancestors were clever. The door only opens from outside, and only if you know where to press. They filed through in amazement, emerging into a valley that shouldn't exist, a hidden oasis, with springs, grassland, and ancient ruins that spoke of centuries of use. The Valley of Souls. Elder Sani breathed. I haven't been here since I was young. How is this possible? Someone asked. Volcanic activity, Elias said, recognizing the geology. Created a collapsed caldera, sealed except for that entrance. Natural springs from an underground river. Your science explains the how, Elder Sani said, but not the why. This place has been kept secret for 300 years, passed from keeper to keeper. She looked at Nayeli. Your mother brought you here when you were 7. Do you remember? I thought it was a dream, Nayeli whispered, staring at the pictographs covering the canyon walls. She said someday I would need to remember the songs that opened the door. And you did. While the families set up shelter in the ancient stone buildings, Elias studied their defenses. One entrance was good for security, bad if they were trapped, but the valley was large enough to sustain them for weeks if needed, and the walls were too steep to scale without equipment. Satisfied? Nayeli asked, finding him examining the entrance mechanism. Getting there, this is quite a secret to keep. Every culture has its sacred places, places where we keep what matters most. She gestured to where Elder Sani and others were carefully removing wrapped bundles from hidden chambers. Those aren't gold or silver. They're our history. Songs written in symbols only we can read. Treaties the American government would rather forget. Proof of our ownership of lands now claimed by others, including Harrow's ranch. Especially Harrow's ranch. She smiled grimly. That's why he wants this so badly. With these documents destroyed, no one could challenge the land grabs. A shout from outside interrupted them. Che came running through the entrance, breathless. Soldiers! Real soldiers, not Harrow's men! Coming with a man in a suit! Everyone tensed hands, moving to weapons, but Elias recognized the lead rider as he came into view. Jack Hollister, he said, surprised. And is that Judge Carson? It was. The territorial judge, known for his fairness, rode with an escort of actual U.S. Army troops. With them was Ruby Whitlow, and surprisingly several Apache riders Elias didn't recognize. Elias Crow, the judge called. Miss Whitlow said we'd find you here. Said you had evidence of crimes that need addressing. I do, but how did you? I've had my suspicions about Colonel Harrow for some time, Judge Carson said, dismounting. When Miss Whitlow brought me your documentation along with testimony from various merchants and citizens, I knew it was time to act. Testimony? Ruby grinned. Turns out lots of folks don't like being extorted. They just needed someone to go first. She produced a leather satchel. Your hidden stash, by the way. Figured you'd want it. Elias opened it, revealing 15 years of careful documentation. Names, dates, crimes. Everything needed to destroy Harrow legally. This is good, the judge said, reviewing the papers, but I'll need witnesses, people willing to testify. You'll have them, Elder Sani said, stepping forward. Our people have much to say about Colonel Harrow and Taza Malak. The judge looked surprised, but pleased. Apache testimony is acceptable in my court, though I should warn you Harrow's gathering a large force. He means to attack your camps tonight. Let him, Kiona said. They'll find empty camps. We've evacuated everyone. Smart, but he'll track you here eventually. Then we'd better act fast, Elias said. Judge, if I can get Harrow to confess in front of witnesses, that would be ideal. But how? Elias looked at Nayeli. Harrow wants 2 things, this valley and her. We give him a chance at both. Absolutely not, Naichi said immediately. Hear me out. We send word that Nayeli's willing to trade information about the valley for safe passage for the families. Harrow won't be able to resist. It's too dangerous, Kiona protested. Yes, Nayeli said quietly. But it could work. Everyone turned to her. You can't be serious, her brother said. I am. Harrow's arrogant. He'll believe I'd betray our people to save myself because that's what he would do. She met Elias's eyes. But I won't be alone, will I? Never, he promised. The judge looked between them, understanding dawning. Well then, let's discuss specifics. The plan came together quickly. Ruby would return to town, spread word that Nayeli had fled the valley after an argument with the council. Taza, eager to prove his worth to Harrow, would certainly take the bait. Meanwhile, the judge and his soldiers would position themselves nearby, but hidden. The risk is all yours, Judge Carson told Nayeli. Are you certain? My people need justice, Not just Apache justice, but American justice too. This is how we get both. As they prepared, Che pulled Elias aside. I want to help. You are helping. You're our messenger. I mean really help in the fight. Elias knelt to meet the boy's eyes. You know what the hardest part of being a warrior is? What? Knowing when not to fight. Your job is to protect the families if this goes wrong. Can you do that? The boy nodded solemnly. That evening they set the trap at Skeleton Ridge, a place symbolic for both sides where the first Apache settler conflict in the area had occurred 20 years earlier. Nayeli waited alone by a small fire, seemingly vulnerable. Elias and others hidden in the rocks, waiting. They came just after sunset, Harrow, Taza, and a dozen men. Harrow's silver hair caught the dying light as he dismounted, supremely confident. Well, well, he called. The little storyteller all alone. Where's your protector? Gone. Nayeli said, her voice carrying exhaustion that wasn't entirely feigned. The council discovered I was going to trade information. They cast me out. And Crow took the families deeper into the canyons, said I wasn't worth protecting anymore. Harrow laughed. Typical. Men like him, they're all about honor until it costs them something. He moved closer and Elias had to force himself not to react from his hiding spot. So you'll tell me where the valley is, for a price. Name it. Safe passage to California, and money, enough to start over. Done. Harrow was practically salivating. Now where? First, call off your attacks on the camps. Why would I do that? Because I know where everyone is hiding. Attack empty camps and you look foolish. Let me guide you to them after you have the valley, and you're a hero. Taza stepped forward. She's lying. This is a trap. Of course it is, Harrow said dismissively. But she's also desperate, aren't you, my dear? He moved even closer to Nayeli, reaching out to touch her face. She didn't flinch, though Elias saw her hand move subtly toward her hidden knife. Tell me, Harrow continued, does Crow know what Taza did to your brother? How he begged at the end? My brother is dead, Nayeli said flatly. Oh yes, very dead. Taza was quite thorough. Harrow smiled at the memory. Just like I was thorough at Whispering Creek. There it was. Elias forced himself to stay still to wait. You were at Whispering Creek? Nayeli asked, playing her part perfectly. I commanded at Whispering Creek, gave the orders myself. 43 Apache dead, including those children everyone makes such a fuss about. He shrugged. War is war. The weak die, the strong take what they want. Like you took Crow's family. Harrow's eyes lit up with malicious pleasure. He told you about that. Yes, that was satisfying. The woman fought hard, I'll give her that. But the child, she just cried for her daddy. Pathetic, really. In his hiding place, Elias's vision went red. His finger found the trigger. One shot. But then Nayeli spoke again, her voice steady. Tell me about the child. Why? Because I want to know what kind of man I'm dealing with. Harrow laughed. The kind who wins. The child was, 5'6" small thing, kept asking why. His smile was cruel. I told her it was because her father was weak, that he'd chosen savages over his own kind. And then I shot her and her mother, made sure Crow would find them though, left a message pinned to the door about the cost of race treachery. You wrote the message, every word. In your own hand, of course. He frowned. Why does that matter? Because Judge Carson said stepping into view, with his soldiers, handwriting can be compared, and you've just confessed to murder in front of a dozen witnesses. Harrow went for his gun, but Elias was already moving. His shot took the weapon from Harrow's hand, sending it spinning into the darkness. Don't, Elias said, emerging from the shadows, his rifle trained on Harrow's chest. I've waited 15 years for this moment. Give me an excuse. Harrow clutched his wounded hand, staring at Elias with a mixture of fear and rage. You set me up. No, Nayeli said, standing and brushing dust from her dress. You set yourself up. We just gave you the rope. Taza tried to run, but Naichi and his warriors materialized from the rocks, blocking his escape. The traitor fell to his knees. Please, he begged. I was just following orders. Harrow made me. You killed our people for silver, Kiona said coldly. You sold our sacred places for whiskey. You deserve no mercy. But he'll get a trial, Judge Carson said firmly. Both of them will. Proper trials with all evidence presented. He looked at the Apache warriors. This is how we build trust between our peoples. Through law, not vengeance. For a moment the knight balanced on a knife's edge. Then Elder Sani spoke. The judge speaks wisdom. Let the white man's law judge the white man, and let our council judge our own. She looked at Taza with disgust. You are cast out. No Apache will shelter you, feed you, or acknowledge you. You are dead to us. Taza's face went ashen. For an Apache, such exile was worse than death. As the soldiers shackled Harrow, he stared at Elias. This isn't over, Crow. I have friends' influence. You have nothing, Ruby Whitlow said, stepping forward. Your assets have been frozen pending investigation. Your men have been arrested, and every crime you've committed for the last 15 years is documented. She smiled sweetly. I've been busy. The trial took place 3 weeks later in Tucson. Harrow was convicted of multiple murders, extortion, and fraud. The revelation about Whispering Creek caused a scandal that reached Washington with several other officers implicated. Harrow was sentenced to hang. Taza was tried by the Apache Council and sentenced to exile. He was last seen heading to Mexico, broken and alone. But the real victory came when Judge Carson recognized the Apache claims to their lands using documents from the Valley of Souls. Thousands of acres stolen over decades were returned, including the land Harrow had claimed. Standing on the ridge overlooking Stillwater Mesa, now legally his, again Elias felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years, peace. It's beautiful, Nayeli said, joining him. She moved easier now, her wounds healed, though the scars remained. It is. He hesitated, then asked, What will you do now? The council wants me to be a teacher, to share the stories with the children, make sure they're not forgotten. She looked at him sideways. They also suggested I might want to build bridges between our peoples. Bridges. Starting with one particular bridge. She moved closer, her shoulder touching his. If that's acceptable. More than acceptable. He turned to face her fully. Nayeli, She stopped him with a finger to his lips. I know, but say it anyway. I love you. Even though I'm Apache. Because you're you, Apache Mexican, whatever else you're you. She smiled, that transformative expression that had become more common over the weeks. And you're not the ghost of Whispering Creek anymore. No. Then who am I? Elias Crow, rancher, protector, bridge builder. She took his hand. The man I love. They were married 2 months later in a ceremony that combined Apache and frontier traditions. Elder Sani presided, Judge Carson witnessed, and Che served as best man, proud in his new role as official messenger between the ranch and the Apache camps. Ruby Whitlow, watching the ceremony, wiped away tears. Never thought I'd see the day Elias Crow smiled like that. Love does strange things, Jack Hollister agreed. As the sun set over Stillwater Mesa, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, the newly joined couple stood together looking out at the land that had seen so much pain but now held so much promise. No regrets? Nayeli asked. None, Elias said. 15 years of hunting and I never found what I was looking for until I stopped looking. And what were you looking for? Redemption, I thought, or revenge. Turns out what I needed was a reason to stop running from the past and start building a future. She leaned into him, careful and trusting at once. The future won't be easy. There are still those who won't accept us from both sides. Let them try to stop us. Such confidence. Not confidence. Faith. He kissed the top of her head. Faith in us, in what we're building. Che came running up as always, bearing news. Riders coming, but it's okay, it's a celebration party from the Apache camp. Indeed it was. Warriors and families bringing gifts and food, ready to celebrate the union that many saw as a symbol of possible peace between peoples. As the festivities began, Elder Sani pulled the couple aside. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I didn't tell you about the Valley of Souls." They waited. "There's a prophecy, older than even I know. It speaks of a time when Apache and white blood would join, creating children who could walk in both worlds without being torn apart by either." She looked at Nayeli's still flat stomach with knowing eyes. "I think perhaps that time has come." Nayeli's hand went to her belly, eyes widening. "How did you—" "I'm old, child, not blind. The spirits have already blessed your union." She smiled. "The child will be born in spring when the desert blooms, a good omen." Elias felt his world shift again, but this time toward something bright and full of possibility. A child. "A bridge," Elder Sani corrected. "The first of many, if the spirits are kind." As night fell and the celebration continued, Elias found himself thinking not of the past, but of the future. Of children who would know both Apache songs and frontier ballads. Of a ranch that would be a gathering place for all peoples. Of love that transcended the boundaries others tried to impose. The ghost of Whispering Creek was truly dead. In his place stood a man who had found what 15 years of vengeance couldn't give him home. The spring rains came early that year, transforming the desert into a carpet of wildflowers that stretched from Stillwater Mesa to the distant mountains. Nayeli stood at the window of their expanded cabin, her hand resting on her swollen belly, watching Elias work with the horses in the corral below. 6 months had passed since their wedding, and the ranch had become something neither of them had quite expected, a sanctuary where Apache and settler children played together while their parents negotiated new treaties of cooperation. "You shouldn't be standing so long," Elder Sani said from behind her, though her tone was gentle rather than scolding. "The baby's restless today." Nayeli replied, feeling another kick, like father, like child, always moving. "Or like mother," Elder Sani countered with a knowing smile. "You never could stay still either." A dust cloud on the horizon caught their attention. Riders approaching fast, too fast for a social visit. Elias had seen them too, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle propped against the fence, though he didn't pick it up yet. The lead rider became visible as they approached, and Nayeli's breath caught. It was Ruby Whitlow, her usually composed face tight with urgency. Behind her rode Judge Carson himself, along with several territorial marshals. "Trouble," Elder Sani said quietly. Nayeli was already moving toward the door, her pregnancy making her gait awkward but determined. She reached the porch as Ruby dismounted, dust still swirling around them. "What's happened?" Elias asked, striding over from the corral. Ruby's face was grim. "Harrow's escaped." The words hung in the air like a curse. Nayeli felt the baby kick hard, as if responding to her sudden fear. "How?" Elias's voice was deadly quiet. Judge Carson dismounted, his aged face drawn with exhaustion. "Transport wagon was ambushed 3 days ago heading to Yuma for the execution. 4 marshals dead. Professional job, someone with military training." "Harrow had friends," Ruby added. "More than we knew. There's been talk in town, whispers about making things right, about the natural order being restored." "How many men?" Elias was already calculating the rancher becoming the soldier again. "Unknown, but there's more." The judge pulled a paper from his vest. "This was nailed to my door this morning." Elias read it aloud, his voice growing colder with each word. "The ghost thinks himself alive, but ghosts can't protect what matters. The Apache witch and her mongrel spawn will pay for their sins against nature. The cleansing begins at the full moon. That's tonight, Nayeli said softly, her hand protective over her belly. We're moving you, Judge Carson said immediately. Federal protection in Tucson? No. Nayeli's voice was firm. Running won't solve this, it never has. Nayeli's right, Elias said, surprising everyone. Harrow wants us to run, wants us scattered afraid. But this ranch, this ground, we've built something here. Apache and settlers working together. If we run now, that dies. So what do you propose? The judge asked. Before Elias could answer, Che came galloping up on his paint pony, riding hard from the direction of the Apache camp. The boy, now 14 and grown taller but no less quick, slid from his horse before it fully stopped. Uncle Kiona sends word, he gasped. Strange men watching the camp. White men trying to look like drifters but moving like soldiers. How many? He counted 8, but thinks there are more. Che caught his breath. And Mr. Crow, there's something else. Taza's back. The name fell like a stone into water, creating ripples of tension. Taza Malak, the exile, returning despite the council's judgment. It could only mean he'd allied himself with Harrow. This changes things, Elder Sani said. If Taza's involved, he knows every hidden path, every defensive position we have. Then we don't defend, Elias said, his mind working rapidly. We hunt. Hunt. Judge Carson looked skeptical. Mr. Crow, with respect, you're talking about taking on an unknown force with what, a handful of ranch hands and some Apache warriors? No, a new voice said from the gate. He's talking about taking them on with all of us. They turned to see Jack Hollister riding in with a group of men, ranchers, merchants, even some former soldiers from town. Behind them came Nietzsche with a war party of young Apache warriors painted for battle. Word spreads fast out here, Hollister said, dismounting. Harrow terrorized all of us at some point. Apache, Mexican, white didn't matter to him. We figured it's time to stand together or fall separately. Nayeli felt tears prick her eyes, hormones and emotion mixing. This was what they'd built, not just a marriage or a ranch, but a community that transcended old hatreds. How many fighters do we have? Elias asked, his tactical mind already working. 43, Nietzsche answered. 15 Apache warriors, 20 townsmen, 8 of your ranch hands. Against how many? Scout reports suggest Harrow has maybe 30 men, Kiona said, arriving with another group. But they're positioned to attack multiple targets, the ranch, the Apache camp, the town. Divide us. Then we don't divide, Nayeli said. Everyone turned to her. We bring everyone here, every family, Apache and settler alike. Make our stand together. The ranch can't hold that many, someone started. Not the buildings, she interrupted. The box canyon behind the mesa. One entrance water supply, defensive positions. Our ancestors held off Spanish conquistadors there for 3 months. Elias nodded slowly. She's right, and Harrow won't expect it. He thinks we'll scatter, defend our separate territories. It's risky, Judge Carson warned. If they trap us there, they won't, Elder Sani said with quiet certainty. Because they don't know about the second exit. Everyone looked at her in surprise, even Nayeli. Grandmother, Nayeli asked, child, you know the songs and the stories, but not all the secrets. There's a passage sealed decades ago that leads out through the mountain, small, only wide enough for one at a time, but it exists. Can it be reopened? Elias asked. With work, yes, but quietly, so Harrow doesn't know. The plan came together with desperate efficiency. Families began arriving within the hour, Apache and settler mingling in ways that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Children who had played together now huddled together, their parents standing guard with shared purpose. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of blood orange, Nayeli found herself helping organize defensive positions. Despite her pregnancy, she moved with purpose, her natural leadership showing as she coordinated between Apache traditions and military tactics Elias had taught her. You should rest. Elias said, finding her directing the placement of water barrels. I'll rest when everyone's safe. He pulled her aside gently. Nayeli, if something happens, nothing will happen, she said firmly, then softer, but if it does, promise me something. Anything. Raise our child to know both worlds, the Apache songs and the frontier courage. Make sure they know they were born of love, not just between us, but between peoples. Nothing's going to happen, he repeated, but she saw the promise in his eyes. A shout from the canyon entrance interrupted them, riders approaching under a white flag, 3 of them. As they came closer, Nayeli recognized the lead figure, and her blood went cold. Taza Malak rode between 2 of Harrow's men, but he looked different. Gone was any pretense of Apache dress. He wore the clothes of a white townsman, his hair cut short, a pistol at his hip. I would speak with the council, he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. You have no right to speak here, Kiona responded. You are dead to us. Perhaps, but I bring an offer from Colonel Harrow, one that might save lives. Speak it and leave, Elder Sani commanded. Taza's smile was cold. Simple. Give us the woman Nayeli and Crow, just those 2. Everyone else goes free. The ranch remains untouched, the Apache camp unharmed. Never, Naichi snarled, but Taza continued. Think carefully. 2 lives for hundreds. And consider the woman carries a mixed-blood child. Do you really want such an abomination to— The shot came from Elias's rifle, taking Taza's hat clean off his head. Next one goes between your eyes, Elias said calmly. Deliver your message and go. Taza's face flushed with rage, but he controlled himself. You have 1 hour. After that, everyone dies. Apache white doesn't matter. Harrow has enough men and guns to burn everything you've built. Let him try, someone shouted from the crowd, but Taza wasn't finished. Oh, and Nayeli, your brother might want to check on his wife. Maria was visiting her sister in Willow Creek yesterday. Shame if something happened on her journey back. Naichi lunged forward, but warriors held him back. Maria was pregnant too, only a few weeks behind Nayeli. If you've hurt her, Naichi roared, she's safe, for now, another incentive to comply. Taza wheeled his horse around. 1 hour. After they left, panic threatened to ripple through the gathered families. Children cried, sensing their parents' fear. Arguments broke out about what to do. Enough! Nayeli's voice cut through the chaos. Despite her condition, she climbed onto a wagon bed where everyone could see her. This is what Harrow wants. Fear, division. We are stronger than that. Easy for you to say, someone called out. It's you he wants. Yes, she agreed, and if I thought my sacrifice would truly save you, I would go. But we all know Harrow's word is worthless. Give him me and Elias, and he'll still attack, still try to destroy what we've built. She's right, Ruby said loudly. I've seen Harrow's type before. They don't share power, don't leave witnesses. Then what do we do? A frightened mother asked. We fight, Elias said, joining his wife on the wagon. But not how they expect. Che, how long to reach Willow Creek by the back trails? The boy calculated quickly. 2 hours if riding hard. Take 3 of Naichi's warriors. Find Maria. Bring her here safely. But that leaves fewer fighters. We're not going to win by numbers, Elias said. We win by being smarter. He looked at Elder Sani. How long to open that sealed passage? With enough hands, 2 hours, maybe less. Then we start now, quietly. He began issuing orders with the efficiency of his military training. Ruby, you and the women who can't fight start moving the children through as soon as it's open. Kiona, your warriors take the high ground. Jack, your men. A war cry interrupted him. Apache scouts on the ridge were signaling frantically. Riders approaching from 3 directions, more than the 30 they'd expected. Many more. 60 at least. Naichi counted, his voice grim. They must have recruited every outlaw and malcontent in the territory. They're not waiting for the deadline, someone observed. They're attacking now. Indeed, the riders were forming up, preparing for a coordinated assault. In the dying light, Harrow's silver hair was visible at the center of the formation. "Defensive positions," Elias commanded. "Women and children to the back of the canyon. Fighters to the barricades." But Nayeli wasn't moving toward safety. Instead, she walked toward the canyon entrance, her hands raised. "What are you doing?" Elias caught her arm. "Buying time," she said quietly. "Trust me." Before he could stop her, she called out in a voice that carried across the desert, "Colonel Harrow, I would speak with you." The attacking force paused. After a moment, Harrow rode forward, stopping just within rifle range. "Changed your mind, Apache witch?" "I have a counter-offer," she called back. "Single combat, you and my husband. Winner takes all." Harrow laughed. "Why would I accept that when I have superior numbers?" "Because you're a coward," she said simply. "Always have been. At Whispering Creek you gave orders but never fired a shot yourself. You had others kill women and children while you watched. Careful, woman. You couldn't face Elias when he had a gun, so you went after his family when he was gone. You torture elders and children because grown men make you feel small." Her voice rose. "Everyone knows it. Your own men know it. They follow you for money, not respect." Even from a distance they could see Harrow's face redden. Murmurs ran through his assembled force. "You think your mongrel husband can take me?" Harrow snarled. "I know he can, unless you're too frightened to face him without an army at your back." It was masterfully done. Harrow was trapped by his own ego. Refuse and confirm his cowardice. Accept and risk everything on a single fight. "Fine," Harrow roared. "Single combat. When I win, you come to me willingly and everyone here surrenders. And when my husband wins, you and your men leave. Forever. No retribution, no return." "Agreed." Elias pulled Nayeli aside as Harrow dismounted and began walking toward the designated fighting ground. "That was dangerous," he said. "It was necessary. Look." She nodded toward where workers were frantically but quietly opening the sealed passage. "We needed time, now we have it. And if I lose," she touched his face gently. "You won't. You're fighting for more than revenge now. You're fighting for family, for future." She placed his hand on her belly. "For her. Her Elder Sani says it's a girl. She's never wrong." She kissed him softly. "Now go show Harrow what happens when love fights hatred." The combatants met in the space between the two forces as the last rays of sunlight faded. Judge Carson stepped forward to establish rules, but Harrow waved him off. "No rules. Fight until one can't continue." Elias nodded, handing his rifle to Naichi. Both men retained their pistols and knives. They circled each other in the gathering darkness, torches being lit to provide light. Harrow struck first, his military training evident in his calculated approach. But 15 years of frontier survival had honed Elias into something beyond a soldier. He moved like the desert itself, patient, sudden, unforgiving. The fight was brutal. They grappled in the dust, trading blows that would have felled lesser men. Harrow was stronger than expected, driven by rage and desperation. But Elias fought with something more powerful purpose. When Harrow pulled a hidden derringer from his boot, gasps rose from both sides. But Elias had expected treachery. He rolled aside as the shot fired came up with his knife, and in one fluid motion sent it spinning into Harrow's shoulder. Harrow screamed, dropping the gun. Elias advanced, but Harrow had one more surprise, a second knife pulled from his back. They clashed again, both bleeding now, both tiring. The end came suddenly. Harrow overextended on a thrust, expecting Elias to retreat. Instead, Elias stepped inside the arc, caught Harrow's wrist, and with a move Naichi had taught him threw the colonel to the ground. In seconds, Elias had him pinned his own knife at Harrow's throat. "Yield," Elias commanded. Harrow's eyes darted to his men, looking for salvation, but they stood motionless. Without their leader, faced with united opposition, their courage failed. "Yield," Elias repeated. "I yield." Harrow gasped. But as Elias began to rise, Harrow made his final mistake. His hand went for the pistol still at his hip. The crack of a rifle split the air, and Harrow jerked his hand, falling away from the weapon. Blood spread across his chest. Everyone turned to see who had fired. It was Che, returned from Amir's mission, Maria safe beside him. The boy lowered the smoking rifle. "He was going to shoot Mr. Crow in the back," he said simply. "I couldn't let him." Judge Carson moved forward, checking Harrow's body. "Dead. And justified. I saw him reach for the weapon after yielding." He looked at the assembled outlaws. "As for the rest of you, disperse now and no charges will be filed. Stay and face justice for attempted murder." The outlaws scattered like vultures from a disturbed carcass, riding hard into the night. Only Taza remained frozen between the two groups. "You too," Judge Carson told him. "Leave now." "This isn't over," Taza snarled. "The old ways are dying. You can't stop it." "Maybe they are changing," Elder Sani said, stepping forward, "but not dying, evolving, growing, like this child." She gestured to Nayeli's belly, "who will know both worlds and be stronger for it." Taza spat in the dirt and rode away, a figure of hatred disappearing into darkness. As people began to celebrate, Elias found Nayeli standing apart, her face troubled. "What's wrong? We won." "Taza was right about one thing," she said quietly. "The old ways are changing. Not everyone will accept what we're building here. Then we'll face that when it comes, together." She leaned into him, drawing comfort from his strength. Together. A month later, as spring reached its peak, Nayeli's labor began. The birth was difficult, lasting through a full day and night. Apache midwives and the town doctor worked together, another symbol of the unity they'd forged. When the baby's cry finally rang out, strong and healthy tears ran down Elias's face. The child was perfect, dark hair like her mother, gray eyes like her father, skin the color of honey that belonged fully to neither world and therefore to both. "What will you name her?" Elder Sani asked, placing the baby in Nayeli's exhausted but radiant arms. Nayeli looked at Elias and they spoke the name together, Sarah Ayana Crow. Sarah for the past that would never be forgotten. Ayana meaning eternal blossom in Apache, for the future that would grow from their union. Crow for the family she would help rebuild. As news of the birth spread, people came to pay respects. Apache and settler alike bringing gifts and blessings. Ruby Whitlow brought a handmade quilt. Jack Hollister brought a deed to additional land adjoining the ranch, purchased with a collection taken up in town. Naichi brought a cradle board decorated with symbols of protection. Even Judge Carson made the journey from Tucson. "This child," he said, holding the baby carefully, "represents something important. Not just the joining of two peoples, but the possibility of a new way forward. The territory is changing, becoming a state soon. We'll need bridges like her." Che, now officially adopted as the child's brother and protector, stood watch at the door with the seriousness of his new responsibility. He'd grown much in the past year, the boy becoming a young man who moved easily between both worlds. 3 days after the birth, as Nayeli recovered, and Elias learned the terrifying intricacies of changing a baby, a visitor arrived unexpectedly. An old Apache woman, older than even Elder Sani, riding alone from the deep desert. "I am Morning Star," she said simply. "I have come to see the child of prophecy." Elder Sani gasped. "Grandmother Morning Star, but you never leave the sacred mountains. For this, I make exception." The ancient woman approached the baby, studying her with eyes that had seen centuries of change. "Yes, she is the one, the bridge walker. Many will come after, but she is first." She pulled out a small object, a perfectly round turquoise stone wrapped in silver wire hung on a leather cord. "This was made when the world was young," Morning Star said. "Worn by those who would unite divided peoples. Your daughter will need it." We're grateful, Nayeli began, but Morningstar raised a hand. Gratitude is not needed, but vigilance is. This child will face challenges we cannot imagine. Some will see her as salvation, others as threat. Protect her, but do not shelter her. She must know struggle to know strength. As quickly as she had come, Morningstar left, disappearing into the desert like a spirit. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, an extended family now that included dozens of souls from both communities, Elder Sani stood to speak. "We have witnessed something profound," she said. "Not just the birth of a child, but the birth of possibility. This ranch, this alliance we've built, it proves that the future doesn't have to repeat the past." "To the future," Ruby raised her glass. "To the future," everyone echoed. But even as they celebrated, Elias noticed Nayeli at the window, watching the darkness beyond. He joined her baby Sarah sleeping in her arms. "What do you see?" he asked. "Storm clouds," she said softly. "Far off, but coming. Then we'll face them when they arrive. Will we be strong enough?" He put his arm around her, drawing both wife and child close. "Look at what we've already survived, what we've built. Yes, we're strong enough." As if understanding, baby Sarah opened her eyes, those striking gray eyes that seemed to see beyond the present moment. She didn't cry, just watched with an awareness that seemed impossible for one so young. "She knows," Nayeli whispered. "She knows what she is." "A bridge," Elias said. "More than that." Nayeli kissed their daughter's forehead. "She's hope." The spring night was full of sounds, laughter from the main house, Apache songs from the camp, the distant howl of coyotes. It was the sound of a world in transition, of boundaries blurring and new connections forming. Somewhere out in that darkness, Taza Malak nursed his hatred and plotted revenge. Somewhere other heroes schemed to restore what they saw as the natural order. The challenges Morningstar predicted were already taking shape. But for tonight, in this moment, a family stood together, Apache and white past and future united by love and purpose. The baby in their arms was more than just their child. She was proof that from the ashes of tragedy and division, something beautiful could grow. The ghost of Whispering Creek was gone forever. In his place stood Elias Crow, husband, father, protector of a new way forward. Beside him stood Nayeli Kai Crow, teacher, bridge builder, keeper of stories both old and new. And in their arms lay Sarah Ayana Crow, first of her kind, but not the last, carrying in her small body the hopes and dreams of two peoples learning finally to become one. The summer heat had turned brutal by the time Sarah Ayana Crow spoke her first word. It wasn't mama or papa as Elias and Nayeli had expected, but Ashki, the Apache word for boy directed at Che, as he played his harmonica on the porch. The moment crystallized something that had been building for months. Their daughter would indeed walk between worlds, but on her own terms. "She's going to be trouble," Che said with a grin, setting aside his harmonica, as 18-month-old Sarah toddled toward him with determined steps. "Like her mother," Elias agreed, watching from the doorway as Nayeli taught a group of mixed children, Apache and settler, the art of traditional weaving in the shade of the ramada they'd built. The ranch had transformed over the past 2 years. What had started as a single cabin had grown into a small community. 3 Apache families had built homes on the property, working the expanded horse operation. 2 settler families burned out of their own places by raiders had joined them. The boundaries between the groups had blurred until children played without knowing they were supposed to be different. But the peace felt fragile, like morning ice on a desert spring. Elias could sense it in the way travelers hurried past without stopping, in the whispered conversations that died when he entered Ruby's store, in the increasing military patrols that watched their integrated community with suspicious eyes. "Riders," Che announced, his keen eyes spotting dust on the horizon. His hand didn't go to his gun. He'd learned to read the patterns of danger, but his body tensed. The approaching group resolved into U.S. Army cavalry, a full unit of 20 men led by a captain Elias didn't recognize, young, stiff-backed with the kind of pressed uniform that suggested he'd never seen real combat. "Captain Morrison," the officer announced, not dismounting. "Looking for Elias Crow. You found him." Morrison's eyes swept the scene, Apache women weaving white children learning Apache games. Nayeli standing with quiet authority and his mouth tightened with disapproval. "Mr. Crow, I'm here on official business. There's been an incident at the San Carlos reservation. Apache raiders killed 3 settlers. We have reports the raiders might be hiding here." "No raiders here, Captain. Just families trying to make a living." "I'll be the judge of that." Morrison gestured to his men. "Search the property." "You have a warrant." Elias kept his voice level, but his hand drifted toward his sidearm. "Don't need one. Military authority in cases of Apache uprising." "There's no uprising here." "Then you won't mind us looking." Morrison's smile was cold. "Unless you have something to hide." Before Elias could respond, Nayeli stepped forward, Sarah on her hip. The baby watched the soldiers with those unsettling gray eyes. "Captain Morrison," Nayeli said pleasantly, "would you and your men like some water? It's a hot day for such heavy uniforms." The captain looked thrown by her perfect English, her calm demeanor. "We're not here for hospitality, ma'am." "No, but you're here representing the United States Army, aren't you?" "My husband served with distinction. Our friend Judge Carson speaks highly of military protocol." She smiled. "I'm sure you follow proper procedures. The Treaty of 1882 specifically states that integrated settlements require civil, not military jurisdiction unless there's evidence of immediate threat." Morrison's jaw clenched. "You seem well-versed in law for an Apache woman." "I'm well-versed in law for any woman, Captain, just as you're ill-mannered for any man." Several soldiers tried to hide smiles. Morrison's face reddened. "Search the buildings," he ordered sharply. The soldiers dismounted, but their search was perfunctory. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. The raiders Morrison sought were likely desperate young men from the reservation driven to violence by starvation and broken promises, not the kind who'd seek shelter at an integrated ranch. But as one soldier emerged from the barn, he was holding something that made Elias's blood run cold. Harrow's pistol, the one from their fight 2 years ago. Elias had kept it as evidence, locked in a trunk. "Captain," the soldier called. "Found this hidden in the barn. Matches the description of a weapon stolen from a military supply wagon last month." It was a lie, and everyone knew it. But Morrison smiled triumphantly. "Mr. Crow, you're under arrest for possession of stolen military property." "That's ridiculous," Ruby Whitlow said, having arrived during the search with her weekly supply delivery. "That gun's been here since Harrow died. I can testify." "Military matter, ma'am. Civil testimony isn't relevant." Morrison nodded to his men. "Take him." As soldiers moved toward Elias, something unexpected happened. Sarah, barely walking, toddled forward and planted herself between the soldiers and her father. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood there with an expression that seemed ancient on her baby face. The lead soldier hesitated, looking to Morrison for guidance. In that moment of hesitation, the situation shifted. Apache warriors materialized from seemingly nowhere. Naichi and his men, who'd been working in the far pasture. Settler ranch hands emerged from the buildings, rifles casual but present. Morrison's men suddenly realized they were surrounded not by enemies, but by a community. Men and women, Apache and white, all standing together. "Captain," Judge Carson's voice rang out as he rode through the gate, somehow having arrived at exactly the right moment. "What seems to be the problem here, Judge? This is military business. On private property in my jurisdiction, I'll need to see your authorization." Morrison produced papers, but Carson barely glanced at them. "These are 3 weeks old. The territorial governor revoked military authority in integrated settlements last week. Didn't you receive the update?" The captain's confident facade cracked. We've been in the field. Then let me update you. Mr. Crow is a respected citizen. That weapon is evidence in a closed case, and you're trespassing. Carson's voice hardened. Leave. Now. Morrison looked around at the assembled crowd, calculated odds, and made the wise choice. This isn't over, he told Elias. Your kind of mixing, it's unnatural, against God's plan. Funny, Elder Sani said, emerging from the house where she'd been resting. My God seemed fine with it. The soldiers left in a cloud of dust and wounded pride, but the damage was done. The fragile peace had been cracked. They'll be back, Elias said quietly to Carson. Probably. Morrison's part of a new faction in the military. They believe in purification of the territories before statehood. The judge looked tired. You need to be careful, all of you. That night, after Sarah was asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, Nayeli found Elias standing watch on the roof rifle across his knees. You're expecting trouble, she said, settling beside him. Morrison was testing us, seeing our defenses, our alliances. He scanned the darkness. Someone sent him. Someone who knows about us, about what we're building. Taza. Maybe. He vanished after Harrow died, but men like him don't just disappear. They plan, they recruit, they wait. Nayeli was quiet for a moment, then, I'm pregnant again. The words hung in the night air. Elias turned to her, seeing the mix of joy and fear in her eyes. When Winter, Elder Sani says it's a boy this time. He pulled her close, feeling the familiar mix of happiness and terror that came with bringing children into an uncertain world. We'll protect them, both of them. All of them, she corrected, gesturing toward the homes scattered across their land. This is bigger than just our family now. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another, then another. Elias recognized the pattern, not coyotes at all, but signals. Apache signals, but wrong, somehow corrupted. Get everyone inside, he said urgently. Now. Nayeli didn't question, sliding down from the roof with practiced ease despite her condition. Within minutes, the ranch was alert, but quiet families secured fighters positioned. The attack came from the east, where they least expected it. Not Morrison's soldiers or random raiders, but Apache warriors in traditional dress, their faces painted for war. But these weren't Naichi's people, or any band Elias recognized. Ghost dancers, Che breathed, recognizing the symbols. But they're supposed to be peaceful. These weren't. They came in silence, deadly and efficient, targeting the Apache families first. Traitors, their leader called them, in Apache. Corrupted by white influence. The defense was chaotic. How do you fight when the enemy looks like your friends? When Apache faces Apache settler, unsure who to trust. In the confusion, Elias saw him, Taza Malak, dressed now in a mixture of Apache and military clothing, leading the ghost dancers like a prophet of destruction. You pollute our people, Taza shouted at Nayeli as she organized the defense from the main house. Your half-breed children will destroy us all. He raised a rifle toward the window where Sarah slept. Elias moved without thinking, his shot taking Taza in the shoulder, spinning him around. But Taza's followers pressed the attack, and in the melee he disappeared again. The battle was brief, but vicious. The ghost dancers retreated when it became clear the ranch's defenders wouldn't break, but they left damage behind 2 Apache families' homes. Burned, 3 people wounded, trust shattered. They were our people. One Apache woman wept, holding her burned-out home's only surviving possession, a cradle board. How could they do this? Fear, Elder Sani said sadly. Fear of losing themselves. Taza promises them a return to the old ways, but he brings only death. The next morning brought more bad news. Ruby arrived with word that Morrison was using the attack to justify martial law. He's saying the ranch is a breeding ground for violence, that integration leads to chaos. He might be right, Naichi said bitterly. His arm was bandaged from the night's fighting. Maybe we're fools to think we can bridge this divide. No, Sarah's small voice piped up. She'd been playing quietly, but now stood with that strange awareness she sometimes showed, together strong, apart weak. Everyone stared at the toddler, who went back to playing as if she hadn't just delivered profound wisdom. From the mouths of babes, Judge Carson said. He'd arrived with federal marshals, finally bringing real authority. She's right, you know. They want you divided because together you're a threat to their vision of the future. What vision? Elias asked. A territory soon to be state where races don't mix, where Apache are confined to reservations, where men like Morrison and Taza hold power through fear. Carson looked grim. There's going to be a hearing. Territorial governor wants to decide if integrated settlements should be allowed to continue. They can't just dissolve our community, Nayeli protested. They can if they declare it a threat to public safety. Carson handed Elias a document. You've been called to testify. So has Nayeli Elder Sani and several others. 2 weeks from now in Tucson. The preparations for the hearing consumed the ranch. Documents were gathered, testimonies prepared, but underneath ran a current of dread. Too much depended on the outcome, not just their ranch, but the future of integration in the territory. 3 nights before they were to leave for Tucson, Che woke everyone with urgent whispers. Someone's coming, alone, on foot. They prepared for threat, but the figure that stumbled into the lamplight was unexpected. A young Apache woman, badly beaten, carrying a bundle. Please, she gasped. My baby, save my baby. Nayeli recognized her Ayanna, one of Taza's followers, or former follower from the look of her. He's gone mad, Ayanna sobbed as Nayeli tended her wounds. Taza says the spirits tell him to purify our people. He's planning something terrible. What? Elias demanded. The hearing. He's going to attack during the hearing. Make it look like integrated settlements lead to violence. Morrison's helping him. She clutched Nayeli's hand. I couldn't let him use my child for his war. The implications were staggering. If Taza attacked the hearing with Apache warriors, it would confirm every fear about integration. The movement would die, and with it, any hope for peaceful coexistence. We have to warn them, Ruby said. Warn them of what? Elias countered. That Apache warriors might attack. That's exactly what Morrison wants us to say. It plays right into his hands. Then what do? Elder Sani, who'd been quiet, spoke up. We go to the hearing as planned, but we go ready for war and peace both. The journey to Tucson took 2 days. They traveled in a large group, families, fighters, children. Sarah rode with her mother, chattering in a mix of Apache and English that made the adults smile despite their tension. The night before the hearing, camped outside Tucson, a visitor arrived. Morning Star, the ancient Apache woman who'd blessed Sarah at birth, emerged from the darkness like a spirit. The child, she said simply. Let me see her. Sarah went to the old woman without fear, placing her small hand in the gnarled one. Tomorrow brings blood, Morning Star said, but also birth. The old world dies, the new begins. This child stands at the crossroads. She looked at Nayeli's swollen belly. Both children do. Can you tell us what happens? Nayeli asked. Choices happen. Yours, theirs, everyone's. The bridge you've built will be tested by fire. Some will cross, some will fall, some will turn back. She touched Sarah's face gently. But this one will stand firm. She left as mysteriously as she'd arrived, leaving them with prophecy but no clarity. The hearing was held in Tucson's largest building, a former mission-turned-courthouse. The room was packed, settlers on one side, Apache on another, the integrated families uncertain where to sit, until Sarah pulled free from her parents and toddled right down the middle, forcing them to follow. The territorial governor, a political appointee more concerned with statehood than justice, presided. Captain Morrison presented his case, first lurid tales of violence, mixing of races, leading to moral decay, the threat to American values. Then came their turn. Elder Sani spoke of tradition evolving, not dying. Ruby talked about economic prosperity through cooperation. Nietzsche described young warriors finding purpose beyond war. But it was Nayeli who captured the room. She stood, her pregnancy visible, Sarah at her side, and spoke not of policy, but of people, of children playing together without knowing they were supposed to be enemies, of families sharing grief and joy regardless of skin color, of love that transcended boundaries. "You fear us," she said, looking directly at Morrison, "not because we're violent, but because we're peaceful. We prove your lies wrong simply by existing." That's when the first shot rang out. The room exploded into chaos. Apache warriors burst through the windows, Taza's ghost dancers painted for death. Soldiers appeared, but instead of defending, some joined the attack. Morrison's trap was sprung, but they'd underestimated the integrated families. Apache warriors and settler fighters moved in practiced coordination, protecting civilians, creating defensive positions. Elias and Nietzsche fought back-to-back, covering each other without thought. In the chaos, Taza appeared, making straight for Nayeli and Sarah. His eyes were wild, fanatic. "The abomination dies today." Elias moved to intercept, but too many fighters stood between them. He watched in horror as Taza raised his knife, saw Nayeli pull Sarah behind her, prepared to take the blade herself. The shot that stopped Taza came from unexpected quarters. Captain Morrison stood there, smoking pistol in hand, his face pale. "Enough," Morrison said. "This isn't what I wanted. Not children, never children." Taza felt his knife clattering away. The ghost dancers, seeing their prophet fall, wavered. The corrupt soldiers, witnessing Morrison's betrayal of the plan, hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, federal marshals flooded the room, Carson leading them. "Everyone stand down," the judge roared. "By federal authority, everyone stand down." The fighting stuttered to a stop. Taza lay bleeding but alive. Morrison stood in shock at what he'd done, what he'd almost allowed. The room held its breath. Then Sarah walked forward. The tiny girl moved through the frozen tableau of violence, stepping over weapons past wounded men, until she stood in the center of the room. She looked around at all the faces, Apache white mixed, and spoke in a voice that carried impossible authority for a toddler. "Stop fighting! Family now!" The simplicity of it, the pure innocence of the command from a child who embodied everything they were fighting about, broke something in the room. A settler woman began crying. An Apache warrior lowered his weapon. One by one, the tension drained away. The governor, who'd hidden behind his desk during the fighting, emerged shakily. "The hearing is concluded," he stammered. "The evidence is clear." Everyone waited. "Integrated settlements represent the future of the territory," he said, the words seemingly pulled from him. "They will be protected under law." The celebration was muted, too much blood on the floor for true joy. But as families helped families regardless of race, as wounds were tended by whoever had skill, as children were comforted in whatever language brought peace, something fundamental had shifted. Morrison was arrested, though his last-minute change of heart would factor in his trial. Taza survived to face justice, though he would spend his remaining years in prison, his movement shattered. The ghost dancers dispersed, some returning to reservations, others joining integrated communities. A week later, back at the ranch, Nayeli gave birth to their son. The labor was easier this time, as if the universe owed them some small mercy. They named him Elias Nahuel Crow Elias for his father Nahuel, meaning jaguar in Apache, a warrior's name for peaceful times. "He's perfect," Elias said, holding his son while Sarah peered curiously at her new brother. "Baby," she announced solemnly, then kissed the infant's forehead with toddler gentleness. Elder Sani, watching the scene, smiled. "The bridge is built," she said. "Now we teach others to cross." Word of the hearing and its violent resolution spread across the territory. Some settlements tried to follow their model of integration. Others resisted clinging to old divisions, but the legal precedent was set, the path forward established. On their son's first-month celebration, the ranch hosted visitors from across the territory. Apache chiefs and town mayors, military officers, and tribal elders, all coming to see what had been built in the desert. They found not a utopia. There were still conflicts, still distrust, but a functioning community where differences were acknowledged but not divisive. Judge Carson, now a federal judge with broader authority, pulled Elias aside during the celebration. "You know this is just the beginning. Statehood is coming, and with it new challenges. There are those in Washington who don't like what you represent." "Let them come," Elias said, but without his old anger. "We've faced worse. Have you? What you've built here challenges fundamental assumptions about American society, about race, about culture, about what civilization means." Carson looked troubled. "There are powerful forces that would rather see you fail. Then we'd better not fail." That night, after guests had departed and children were asleep, Elias and Nayeli stood on their porch looking out over their domain. Lights glowed in scattered homes where Apache and settler families lived side by side. The sound of Che's harmonica drifted from the barn where he was teaching other young people songs that belonged to no single tradition. "Do you ever regret it?" Nayeli asked. "Giving up your quest for vengeance?" "Every day," Elias admitted, then clarified. "I regret that it took me so long to see there was another way. The ghost of Whispering Creek would have killed Taza Morrison, all of them. Yes, and accomplished nothing but more ghosts." He pulled her close, careful of where she still healed from childbirth. "Elias, Crow, husband and father, helped build something that will outlast us all." A cry from inside the baby, waking for feeding. Nayeli went to tend him while Elias checked on Sarah. He found her standing in her crib, looking out the window at the stars. "Papa," she said, pointing up. "Bright." "Yes, sweetheart, the stars are bright tonight." "We bright too." The question caught him off guard, its depth impossible for her age, yet perfectly natural from this child who embodied possibilities. "Yes," he told her, lifting her to see better. "We're bright too." She settled against his shoulder, satisfied with the answer. Within minutes, she was asleep again, but Elias held her longer, thinking about the world she would inherit. It would still have division, still have hatred, but it would also have places like this ranch, where boundaries blurred and bridges stood strong. The future remained uncertain. There would be more Captain Morrisons, more Tazas, more who feared change and fought to prevent it. But there would also be more Sarahs and Nahuel's children who knew no world but one where difference didn't mean division. The letter arrived on a morning when the desert bloomed with unexpected rain, 10 years after that violent hearing in Tucson. Sarah, now 11, brought it to her father, where he worked training a young colt. Her brother Nahuel trailing behind her as always. The boy, 9 years old, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's steady hands, could track anything that moved across the desert floor. "Federal seal," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of understanding beyond her years. She'd learned to read such signs, to know when official correspondence brought danger to their door. Elias opened it slowly, aware that Nayeli watched from the garden, where she taught the newest refugees, a family of Chinese railroad workers and their Apache neighbors who'd fled reservation corruption, how to cultivate desert crops. The years had brought streams of such seekers to Stillwater Mesa until their ranch had become less a single property and more a small town. "They want Sarah," he said simply, the words falling like stones into still water. Nayeli was beside him in moments, reading over his shoulder. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, newly reorganized under progressive leadership, wanted their daughter for a special program, not the brutal boarding schools of old, but something new, an academy in Washington where exceptional children of mixed heritage would be educated to become bridges between cultures. "It's an honor," the letter claimed. Your daughter has been selected from hundreds of candidates. It's a trap, Che said. He was 24 now, married to Maria with 3 children of his own, but he still watched over Sarah like she was made of spun glass and steel both. They want to take her from us, use her. Maybe, Elder Sani said from her chair on the porch. At 93, she moved slowly, but her mind remained sharp as obsidian. Or maybe the world finally understands what we've known all along, that children like Sarah are the future. Sarah herself stood silent, reading the letter with those gray eyes that seemed to hold storms. When she finally spoke, her words surprised them all. I want to go. The argument that followed shook the ranch's foundations. Nahuel cried, begging his sister not to leave. Nayeli's face went tight with fear, masked as anger. Even Elias, usually so controlled, raised his voice in protest. But Sarah stood firm, exhibiting the iron will she'd inherited from both parents. You built this place to prove we could live together, she said. Now I need to take that message beyond these borders. That's what I was born for, isn't it? Before anyone could answer, riders appeared on the horizon. Not soldiers this time, but Apache scouts riding hard. The lead rider, a young warrior named Joseph, who'd grown up on the ranch, nearly fell from his horse in exhaustion. Taza, he gasped. He's escaped from prison. He's gathering the last of the ghost dancers. They say... He paused, catching his breath. They say he's coming for the children, all the mixed-blood children, tonight. The ranch exploded into motion. Families were gathered, defenses prepared. But even as they fortified, Elias knew something was wrong. Taza had been in prison for 10 years, reportedly dying of consumption. How had he escaped? Why now? The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Morrison, grayed and worn by a decade in military prison, arrived under federal guard just as the sun began its descent. His presence sent ripples of anger through the ranch, but Judge Carson, who accompanied him, raised a hand for silence. He has information, Carson said simply. Listen. Morrison looked nothing like the rigid officer who'd terrorized them years before. Prison had broken something in him, or perhaps fixed what had been broken all along. Taza didn't escape, he said. He was released by Senator Blackwood's men. The name meant nothing to most, but Elias knew it. Blackwood was a powerful voice in Washington, advocate for racial purity and manifest destiny. If he was involved, it's not about revenge, Morrison continued. It's about the academy. They know Sarah's been selected. If she's killed by Apache radicals, the program dies. Integration dies. Everything you've built here becomes proof that mixing races leads to violence. You're part of this, Nietzsche accused, his hand on his knife. I was, Morrison admitted. 10 years ago I would have celebrated your deaths. But 10 years in a cell gives a man time to think, to realize that children are children regardless of blood. He looked directly at Sarah. I saw you that day at the hearing, saw you stop the violence just by being. I've been haunted by what I almost let happen. Pretty words, Che spat. But why should we believe you? Morrison pulled out a map, military precise. Because I know exactly how they're going to attack. Every position, every timing. I helped plan it before my arrest. They never changed it because they didn't think I'd ever tell. As darkness fell, they prepared based on Morrison's intelligence. But Elias noticed Sarah slipping away from the main preparations, heading toward the sacred cave, where Elder Sani kept the old stories. He followed, finding her standing before the pictographs that told of unity and division, of bridges built and burned. I'm scared, Papa, she admitted, the first time in years she'd shown such vulnerability. Good. Fear keeps us sharp. Not of dying, of failing. What if I'm not strong enough to be what everyone needs me to be? Elias knelt beside his daughter, seeing in her face echoes of her mother's determination and his own doubts. You don't have to be anything but yourself. That's always been enough. But the prophecies are guides, not chains. You choose your own path, Sarah. You always have. A sound outside made them both tense. Not the expected attack, but singing. Apache voices raised in harmony, but the words were English. Settler voices joining in Apache. The song grew as more voices added to it, creating something new, neither fully Apache nor fully white, but somehow both. They emerged to find the entire community, gathered faces painted with symbols that belonged to no single tradition. Children held hands across racial lines, their parents standing guard together. Even Morrison had been given a rifle taking position beside men he'd once tried to destroy. If they want our children, Ruby Whitlow declared, her gray hair wild in the wind, they'll have to go through all of us. The attack came at midnight, but it wasn't what they expected. Yes, ghost dancers emerged from the darkness, but with them came white supremacists, Mexican bandits, even some Chinese Tong members, every group that had reason to hate what Stillwater Mesa represented. And leading them all was Taza, but transformed. His hair was cut short, his traditional clothing replaced with an expensive suit. He looked like a politician, not a warrior. "You see," he called out, "I've learned from you, Crow. Integration works both ways. I've united all who hate you." The battle that followed was chaos incarnate. The defenders' knowledge of the attack pattern helped, but the sheer diversity of the attacking force created unexpected challenges. Each group fought differently, making coordinated defense nearly impossible. In the melee, Elias lost sight of his family. He fought desperately, trying to reach the main house where the children had been gathered, but too many enemies stood between. He saw Che go down, blood streaming from a head wound, saw Ruby Whitlow standing over fallen children with a shotgun magnificent in her fury, saw Morrison take a bullet meant for an Apache child, falling with something like peace on his face. Then, cutting through the chaos like a blade of silence, came a child's voice. Not Sarah's, but Nahuel's. The boy stood on the roof of the main house, and he was glowing, not metaphorically, but actually emanating a soft light that grew brighter with each word he spoke. "Stop," he commanded in a voice that seemed to come from the earth itself. "You fight shadows while the real enemy laughs." Everyone froze, even Taza, staring at the impossible child. In that moment of stillness, Sarah emerged beside her brother. She didn't glow, but something about her presence made the light from Nahuel seem to solidify, to become a bridge of pure illumination, connecting all the combatants. "Senator Blackwood," Sarah said clearly, her young voice carrying impossible authority. "He's 5 miles east with federal troops, waiting for us to destroy each other so he can sweep in as the savior, restore order. Both sides die and he becomes governor of the new state." The truth of it rang like a bell. Taza's face went pale as he realized how he'd been used. The white supremacists looked uncertain, understanding they'd been marked for elimination too. "You're lying," Taza said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The truth is written in light," Nahuel said, and somehow his glow intensified, showing shadows that shouldn't exist. The shadows of approaching soldiers waiting for the signal to attack. What happened next would be debated for generations. Some say it was mass hallucination, others claim divine intervention, but everyone present agreed on the basic facts. Faced with betrayal by the very powers they thought they served, the attackers chose a different path. Taza was the first to lower his weapon. "If we fight each other, we all die." "Yes," Sarah said simply, "but if we stand together even for just this moment, we all live." The Mexican bandit leader laughed bitterly. "The government wants us all dead anyway. Apache, Mexican, Chinese, anyone who isn't pure white American." "Not all the government," Judge Carson corrected, standing despite a wounded leg, "but enough of it unless we prove them wrong." The impossible happened. Enemies stood down. Not in friendship, the hatred ran too deep for that, but in recognition of a greater threat. When Blackwood's federal troops finally advanced, expecting to find a massacre, they found instead an armed camp of united peoples. The standoff lasted until dawn. Blackwood himself arrived furious at the failure of his plan, but with Judge Carson there as witness with the territorial governor, arriving with legitimate troops, he couldn't simply order an attack on American citizens defending their property. "This isn't over," Blackwood snarled at Elias. "Your mongrel daughter will never reach Washington alive." "Yes, she will," Taza said unexpectedly. Everyone turned to stare at the former ghost dancer leader, "because I'm going to escort her there myself." The shock of the statement rippled through the crowd. Taza continued, his voice steady. "I've been a fool, driven by hatred, and used by men like him." He gestured at Blackwood. "Let me die with honor protecting what I once tried to destroy." "You'll be arrested the moment you leave here," Carson warned. "Then arrest me in Washington after the child is safe." It was Nayeli who made the decision. "You tried to kill my children multiple times." "Yes." "You burned homes, destroyed families." "Yes." "You betrayed everything sacred." "Yes." She studied him for a long moment, then looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly. "Then your punishment is to live with it, to spend whatever years remain protecting what you once attacked, to see every day what could have been if you'd chosen differently." Elder Sani spoke from her chair, having been carried out to witness the resolution. "The Council of Grandmothers agrees, redemption through service, not death. It's the old way, the true way." 3 weeks later, a remarkable procession left Stillwater Mesa. Sarah rode between her parents, Nahuel beside her. Behind them came an escort of Apache warriors and frontier settlers. And yes, Taza was there too, diminished and watchful but present. Even some of Morrison's former soldiers' men, who'd seen the light of what America could become, joined the guard. They were met at the territorial border by federal marshals, but also by reporters. Word had spread of the girl who stopped a war with words, of the boy who glowed with heaven's light. The journey to Washington became a parade, with crowds gathering to see the children who represented a new future. In the Capitol, they were received by the president himself, who had overruled Blackwood's objections. Sarah spoke to Congress, her young voice carrying the weight of prophecy fulfilled. She told them of the ranch where Apache and white Mexican and Chinese, all manner of peoples, worked together. She spoke of children who knew no racial hatred because they'd never been taught it. She spoke of her brother who could somehow channel light itself when unity was threatened. "We are not the last," she concluded. "All across the territories, children like us are being born, children who belong to all peoples and none. You can try to stop us, but we are the future. The only choice is whether that future comes through blood or through peace." The academy was approved with safeguards. Sarah would attend, but she would return home every summer. More importantly, the school would be open to all children of mixed heritage, creating a generation of bridge builders. Taza kept his word, protecting Sarah through her years in Washington until consumption finally claimed him. His last words, witnessed by Sarah, were, "Tell them I finally understood." Nahuel never left the ranch. His gift, the strange light that came in moments of crisis, made him a figure of mystery and reverence. He became a healer, using his gift to show people the connections between all living things. He married a Chinese Apache girl, their children carrying forward the legacy of integration. Che survived his wounds and became the ranch's leader when Elias finally stepped down. His own children, raised in the tradition of unity, spread across the growing state of Arizona, building their own integrated communities. The years brought changes. Statehood came with laws protecting integrated communities, laws Sarah helped write from Washington. The ranch grew into a town officially named Unity, though everyone still called it Stillwater Mesa. Elder Sani lived to see it all, passing peacefully at 98. Her last words being, "The bridge holds." Elias and Nayeli grew old together, watching their grandchildren play in the same dust where they'd once made their stand against hatred. The ghost of Whispering Creek was now just a legend, told to children as a cautionary tale about the cost of vengeance and the power of redemption. On their 40th wedding anniversary, as the entire town gathered to celebrate, Nayeli found Elias standing at the old fence post where he'd first found her. "Regrets?" she asked, echoing their old ritual. "None," he replied, pulling her close. "Every scar was worth it. Even the ones that still hurt, especially those. They remind me of what we overcame." Sarah arrived for the celebration, now a federal judge herself, her own children bearing the mark of multiple heritages. Nahuel was there with his family, his gift now controlled and used for healing. The town square filled with people of every color and creed, united not by blood but by choice. As the sun set over Stillwater Mesa, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, Elias stood before the gathered crowd to speak. But words failed him as he looked out at what they'd built. Instead, he simply raised his glass of whiskey, the good stuff Ruby had saved for 4 decades, and said, "To Bridges." To Bridges, hundreds of voices replied in a dozen languages. That night, as Elias and Nayeli sat on their porch, watching their legacy dance and sing, below a figure emerged from the darkness. It was Morning Star, the ancient Apache woman, unchanged by the decades that had passed. "It is finished," she said simply. "The prophecy is fulfilled. The bridge walkers have come and they will multiply. The world changes because 2 people chose love over fear." "Will there be peace?" Nayeli asked. "There will be struggle, always struggle. But now there is hope, always hope." She touched both their faces gently. "You may rest now. Your war is over." Morning Star vanished into the desert night for the last time, leaving them with the sound of celebration and the knowledge that they'd changed the world, not through violence, but through the simple radical act of choosing to see enemies as potential family. Elias died 3 years later, peacefully in his sleep, his last words to Nayeli being, "Thank you for saving me." She followed him 6 months after, unable to imagine a world without her partner. They were buried side by side on the hill, overlooking the valley, their graves becoming a shrine to the power of love over hatred. But their story lived on in every mixed-blood child who walked freely between worlds, in every community that chose cooperation over conflict, in every heart that decided bridges were stronger than walls. The Apache girl who'd begged, "I can't live without a man," had become a woman who showed an entire nation how to live with everyone. The ranch at Stillwater Mesa still stands now, a historical monument and living community, both. Visitors come from around the world to see where the future was born in blood and choice. They find Sarah's descendants still there, still building bridges, still proving that from the greatest pain can come the most profound beauty. And sometimes on nights when the moon is dark and the stars are bright, people swear they can see a soft glow emanating from the old house. Nahuel's gift passing down through generations, a reminder that light comes not from purity, but from the mixing of all colors into something brilliant and new. The story ends where it began, with a choice. But now, instead of choosing between revenge and redemption, each new generation chooses between the past's divisions and the future's possibilities. And more often than not, they choose the bridge.